Welcome to the day in history for March 31st. Today, we are going to talk about the Eiffel Tower because today in history, in 1889, the Eiffel Tower is officially opened. Okay, today's big idea is one person's idea can last for generations. Okay, you ready? Okay, we're going to talk about Gustav Eiffel in categories architecture. Okay, here we go. Now, we are in Paris. We are in Central Europe. Paris, there's a lot of stuff happening in the year 1900, 1889, right around there. Now, the reason that this Eiffel Tower was built is something we're going to talk about next. But let's cover a couple other things first. I want to give you some information about Gustav Eiffel and kind of a little bit about his career. So let's talk about Mr. Eiffel. Now, Eiffel was born into a family that owned iron factories and coal factories. Now, this meant that he was born into a fairly successful family and he had access to education. Now, he went to school to become an engineer, and it's interesting that he became an engineer considering that his family worked in or owned these iron factories. Now, iron had become the new material to build with. We had been stuck using wood and stone for, well, pretty much ever. But once iron really came in as a building material, we could do a lot of really interesting things. And that's when we started to see some really tall buildings. Okay. Now, one of his first things that he worked on were bridges. And he gained a reputation for making really, really good iron bridges. This is a bridge that still stands today that he designed. He started with train bridges, but moved on to some other pretty fantastic bridges. Now, Eiffel also helped with the Statue of Liberty. Now, the Statue of Liberty is a beautiful and very iconic statue, but the inside was actually designed by Eiffel. He built he designed all the iron lattice work, all the triangles. Remember, the triangle's the constructor that holds up the Eiffel Tower on the inside. You could actually say that he built the backbone of the Statue of Liberty. Pretty cool. Now, Mr. Coughlin, why are we talking about the French Revolution? Remember the French Revolution? Well, shortly after the American Revolution, there was the French Revolution as well. And the Eiffel Tower was built in part to celebrate 100 years of the French Revolution. So, pretty interesting. Now, it was also built to be the centerpiece or the entryway to the Exposition de Paris 1900. I don't speak French, but I can try. Now, this was an exposition of the year 1900 to showcase and to show off all the amazing technologies that France and other European powers had come up with. This was a time period where we're coming out of what we would consider the old and into the new. And the exposition of 1900 was designed to show off how amazing French scientists, technology, and how amazing their work was. Now, not only was the Eiffel Tower built, but there were a few other amazing structures as well. This is called the Grand Palais. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it translates to the Grand Palace. And it's really cool. It kind of reminds me of the Crystal Palace that we talked about. I found this picture from the inside. I think it was taken in 1909. It's really cool. Check this out. Look how big this place was. This is a showcase of early aircraft and blimps. But look at how big this room was, that it could fit all these airplanes. Could you imagine walking around? This would be like us today going to a giant building to look at like future spaceships. It's amazing. It blew my mind when I saw this picture. I had to show it to you. Okay. Now, they also built the Petite, which I think means small, Palais, which is palace, that was actually like an art museum. And they built this giant Ferris wheel, which is the Grand Roi de Paris, something like that. Okay, so it wasn't just the Eiffel Tower, but the Eiffel Tower was the icon of this exhibition. Now, Eiffel was a pretty popular engineer, and when they asked for designs for this tower that would be the centerpiece, it said that he won pretty easily. Now, it wasn't accepted by everybody in Paris. There were actually quite a few people that did not like this design. They thought it was ugly. They thought it just didn't look good at all. And there were petitions. That's when you go and have people sign things saying, I don't think this is a good idea. There were petitions. Artists spoke out against it. I mean, a lot of people liked it, but there were some people that thought it was going to be pretty ugly. There's even a report of an artist that would have lunch under the Eiffel Tower because that's the only place he could sit and not see it. But pretty quickly, the people of Paris and France came around and it became a beloved icon. Okay, now Eiffel built this in a way, or designed it in a way, so that he could have the parts made somewhere else and shipped in. There were actually 12,000 separate sections of the Eiffel Tower that were built in Eiffel's factories and then shipped to Paris to be assembled. Now, they were all made from iron. They were connected with rivets, which are these giant hunks of metal that hold it together. And there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these things. But they built it really quickly. It took 2 years to complete. And this is a really cool picture of it. It's almost like a 1900s version of a time lapse. But you can see how it very slowly, well, actually quickly, in 2 years, was built. I'll step out so you can take a look. Pretty cool, huh? Now, it was a success. Now, it cost a lot of money to build. And when it was finished, though, in the first few months, there were so many visitors, over 2 million visitors, that it immediately paid for itself. So Eiffel had a pretty good business opportunity here as well. I thought this was a really cool picture of what the exposition might have looked like. I don't know. I could only imagine being there and walking around. Everything is new and shiny. Would have been a really cool time. If I could time travel, I'd probably go back. Well, I go back to a lot of places. But the Crystal Palace, the day in history we did last year, and this would be a really cool thing to do. Okay, so after the Eiffel Tower, which was a huge success, Gustave Eiffel worked on a few other projects. One of them was the Panama Canal. Do you guys remember the day in history about the Panama Canal? Yeah, remember? Remember how we bought it from the French because they kind of failed? Well, Gustave Eiffel designed the lock system, the lock doors for the French Panama Canal. So, not a huge success on this one. Now, he also went on to build one of the first wind tunnels that could test the aerodynamics of wings. Now, aircraft were really taking off at the time. Get it? Taking off. But the wings, you had to put air over it to see if the wings could go up just right. And so he built a wind tunnel to test aircraft wings. So he went on to build and invent quite a few more things. But the Eiffel Tower is still what he's remembered for. It does carry his name. And for 40 years, it was the tallest structure in the world. It was over 1,000 feet tall. Now, it was meant to be temporary. It was actually meant to be taken down after 20 years. But they didn't. Now, in the beginning, it was just a piece of architecture. It was just a tower. People could go up and look at the city. But later on, they actually put radio antennas and broadcasting antennas on the top, and it served as a giant antenna. But today, the Eiffel Tower is an icon of Paris. You can look at just about any postcard or thing from Paris, and there's a pretty good chance, a good portion of those memorabilias or souvenirs from Paris are going to have the Eiffel Tower on it. It is an iconic image from Paris, and that is today's day in history.